Let me ask you something before we even get started. If a police officer walked up to your car window right now and said, "Do you know why I stopped you tonight?" What would you actually say? Be honest. Not what you think the right answer is. What would actually come out of your mouth in that moment when your heart's going a little fast and there's a flashlight in your face? Most people would try to guess. They'd say something like, "Maybe I was going a little fast," or "I think I rolled that stop sign back there." And I completely understand why. You're nervous. You want to seem cooperative. You want this to be over in 2 minutes, and you think being upfront is the fastest way to get there. The problem is, and this is the thing that genuinely surprises people when they hear it, you just confessed to something the officer might not have even been asking about, to a violation he might not have even clocked. You handed it over, freely, because being polite felt like the right move. And look, I'm not saying anything bad about you if that's what you would have done. It's what most people do. It's what I probably would have done before I actually looked into how this stuff works. But there's a gap, a really significant gap, between what feels cooperative and what's actually safe. And that gap is what this whole video is about. So let's get into it. No fluff, just the stuff that actually matters. Here's the first thing you need to understand about a traffic stop. The moment you pull over, you're in what the law calls a seizure. Not an arrest, not a formal detention, just a temporary stop. But it still falls under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. That amendment protects you from unreasonable searches and seizures, and a traffic stop counts. Now here's why that matters immediately. Your constitutional rights, your Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable searches, your Fifth Amendment right to stay quiet. Those are active the second you pull over, not after you've been arrested, not once you're at a police station. Right there, window down, hands on wheel, those rights are yours. But, and this is the part that catches everyone, rights don't work automatically. Nobody enforces them for you in real time. If you give up your rights in that moment, they're gone for that interaction. And the way most people give them up isn't through force or trickery. It's through one completely ordinary word. Yes, that's it, just yes. Mind if I look around? Sure. That 3-second exchange just opened your car up to a legal search. Not because the officer had evidence, not because he had a warrant, because you said yes. And now whatever he finds, everything he finds, is obtained legally, on the record, usable against you. This is called consent, and the Supreme Court has been consistent on this. If you voluntarily consent to a search, you waive your Fourth Amendment protection for that search. Completely. It doesn't matter that you felt pressured. It doesn't matter that you thought saying no would look weird. The legal word for what happened is consent, and consent makes the search valid. Now I know what some of you are already thinking. Okay, but if I say no, isn't that suspicious? Doesn't that make things worse? It's a fair question. Here's the actual answer. Refusing consent to a search is a constitutional right. Courts have addressed this directly. The fact that you declined a search cannot, by itself, be used as grounds to search you anyway. You're allowed to say no. A professional officer who knows the law, which the large majority do, understands that. You exercising your rights is not an admission of anything. Now, does declining always end the situation? No. If the officer has what's called probable cause, if he can point to something specific he observed that gives him reasonable grounds to believe there's evidence of a crime, he can search without your consent. But probable cause is a legal standard. It has to be based on something real that he can articulate. It's a much higher bar than just, he asked and you said no. So the distinction is, your consent removes the bar entirely. Without your consent, he has to meet the bar. That's the whole thing. That's why the word yes is so significant in this context. Okay, let's talk about something that sounds simple, but confuses people in the actual moment. During a traffic stop, you're going to hear things from the officer that are instructions, things you legally have to do. And you're going to hear things that are requests, things you have a right to decline. Knowing the difference is genuinely one of the most useful things you can take from this video. An instruction sounds like, step out of the vehicle. Under a Supreme Court ruling, Pennsylvania v. Mims, officers can order you out of the car during a lawful traffic stop. That's settled law. You comply. No argument. A request sounds like, can I take a look in the trunk? Or, you don't mind if I check the back seat, right? Those are questions. They're asking for your permission. You can say no. Here's where people get tripped up. Requests and instructions often sound exactly the same. Same confident tone, same authority, same delivery. Pop the trunk for me sounds like an order. It isn't. It's a request for your consent, phrased in command form. And in that moment, when you're a little nervous and there's a uniform standing at your window, it feels like something you just have to do. You don't. The simplest test is this. Does it contain a question? Can I? Do you mind? Is it okay if? Would you mind? Those are requests. You can decline politely. And here's what declining actually sounds like. Not, absolutely not, I know my rights. Not a lecture, just, I'd rather not, officer. I hope that's okay. Or even shorter, I don't consent to searches. That's a complete, legally sufficient answer. No explanation required, no justification needed. Now let's talk about the questions, because not every dangerous moment in a traffic stop involves a search request. Where are you coming from tonight? Have you been drinking? Do you know how fast you were going? Is there anything in the car I should know about? These feel like conversation. They're framed like conversation. But here's the thing. You are not legally obligated to answer most of them. The Fifth Amendment gives you the right to remain silent, and it applies during traffic stops, not just in interrogation rooms, right there at the window. Now, a few important specifics here because I don't want to oversimplify this. You are legally required in most states to provide your name, your driver's license, your vehicle registration, and your proof of insurance when asked during a traffic stop. Those you provide. Everything beyond that, where you came from, where you're going, what you were doing, whether you had anything to drink, you have the right to decline to answer. The practical challenge is that saying, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right at a routine traffic stop sounds insane. It creates friction where there doesn't need to be any. So instead, you say something that communicates the same thing without the drama. I'd rather not answer questions, officer. Calm, polite, one sentence, no attitude. That's it. Now let's go through the specific questions because each one has its own weight. Do you know why I stopped you tonight? This is almost always the opener, and it's the one that gets people. Your answer, I'm not sure, officer. That's it. Even if you have a pretty good guess. Even if you're 90% sure it was the speed. You're genuinely not certain of the exact reason he stopped you, and I'm not sure is honest and gives nothing away. Let him tell you. He knows why he stopped you. Do you know how fast you were going? Same answer. I'm not sure. You don't know what his equipment read. You don't know if it was calibrated correctly. You don't know if it was even your car in a cluster of traffic. Don't give him a number to work with. Have you had anything to drink tonight? This one matters a lot. I know the instinct is to say, just one beer, or I had a couple hours ago, I'm totally fine, because that sounds honest and responsible. But the moment you say, just one beer, you've made an admission, you've given a quantity, and you've handed the officer a reason to escalate to field sobriety testing. Your answer? I'd rather not answer questions, officer. That's not evasion, it's your right. And if he had genuine cause to suspect impairment, the investigation would have gone a different direction already. Mind if I take a look around? I don't consent to searches, officer. One sentence, said calmly, said once. And when he follows up, because sometimes he will, with why not, something to hide, your answer is, I'm not hiding anything, I just prefer not to consent to searches. And then you stop talking. You don't need to justify a constitutional right. Here's something I want to spend a minute on because it doesn't get talked about enough. Officers are trained, not in a sinister way, just in the way that any professional develops techniques over time. And some of those techniques are specifically designed to make you more comfortable, more talkative, and more likely to share information you don't have to share. The friendly opener is the most common one. Officer walks up, keeps his voice relaxed, maybe asks how your night's going. It genuinely does feel like small talk. Sometimes it is just small talk, but sometimes it's establishing a baseline, seeing how you communicate when you're comfortable, so that any change in your behavior later becomes something to note. You can be friendly back. I'm doing all right, thanks. That's a perfectly fine response. You just don't have to fill the silence beyond that. The certainty statement is another one. I clocked you at 82, said flatly, like it's already settled. And your brain immediately starts negotiating with it. Was I going that fast? Maybe? And now you're either confirming his number or offering your own. Neither helps you. I'm not sure, officer works here too. And then there's the waiting game. This one's psychological and it's effective. Officer takes your documents, goes back to his car, and sits there for 10, 15 minutes. You're watching the mirror, nothing's happening. It starts to feel like something serious is building up. And when he finally comes back and asks you something, you're so ready for it to be over that you'll agree to almost anything. The counter to this is boring, but it works. Just wait. Hands on the wheel. Don't keep checking the mirror every 30 seconds. Don't reach for your phone repeatedly. Just sit there. Your patience is not suspicious. Your quiet is not an admission. Let him take his time. Let's do the scenarios now, because real situations are messier than a clean explanation. If you're a passenger and not the driver, you're not invisible in this situation. In some states, you can be asked to identify yourself. Whether you're required to answer depends on your specific state's laws, so it's worth knowing where you stand before this ever happens to you. But beyond basic identification, your rights mirror the driver's. You don't have to explain your relationship to the driver, account for your presence, or answer questions about where you've been. Stay still, keep your hands visible, and let the driver handle their side of things without you coaching from the passenger seat. If the officer says he detects an odor, Laws around this are genuinely in flux right now across different states, especially as regulations have changed in recent years around certain substances. What stays constant, regardless of where you are, you still say, "I don't consent to searches, officer." If the officer decides he has probable cause and proceeds without your consent, you do not physically resist. You say clearly once, "I want to note that I am not consenting to this search," and you let it happen. The place to challenge an unlawful search is in a suppression hearing with an attorney, not on the side of a road at night where nothing good comes from physical resistance. If you're stopped somewhere that feels unsafe, this is a real concern and it's valid. If you're alone, it's dark, and the location feels isolated, you can slow down, turn your hazard lights on to show you've seen the officer, and move carefully to a more visible location, a gas station, somewhere lit. This is recognized in most jurisdictions as a reasonable safety measure, not evasion, as long as you're clearly slowing down and not trying to get away. Once you're somewhere safer, the stop proceeds normally. If the officer asks to see your phone, no. Riley v. California, a 2014 Supreme Court decision, established clearly that officers need a warrant to search the digital contents of your cell phone. That's not a gray area. "I don't consent to searches of my phone" is your answer. Don't unlock it, don't put it on speaker, and if it's taken anyway, don't physically resist, state your non-consent, and that becomes something your attorney works with later. If the officer's tone becomes aggressive or intimidating, your instinct is going to be to respond to that energy. Don't. Not because you're wrong, not because you don't deserve to be treated respectfully, you do, but because the roadside is genuinely not where that argument gets resolved. Your calm in that moment is documentation. Your even voice, your non-escalation, your steady hands, all of it becomes part of the record of that interaction. "Officer, I'm trying to cooperate. I want to stay calm here." That's enough. Everything else you save for later, where it can actually matter. If you get ordered out of the vehicle, you comply. Pennsylvania v. Mims is the controlling case here. Officers can lawfully order you out during a traffic stop. Get out calmly, move slowly, hands visible. Exiting the car does not equal consenting to a search of it, and you can say so. "I understand I need to step out. I'm not consenting to a search of the vehicle." One sentence, not a confrontation, just a clear statement. If you're being detained and you're not sure, ask directly, "Am I free to go?" If yes, you leave calmly. If no, you're detained. At that point, say this: "I'd like to speak with an attorney," once, clearly, and then you stop answering questions. Not because you're being difficult, because from that point forward, you need proper legal representation, and anything you say without it is working against you. One more thing before we pull this together, and I think it's actually the most important thing in this video. What if you genuinely did something wrong? What if you were speeding and you know it? What if your registration is actually expired? Does any of what we talked about still apply? Yes, and here's why. Signing a traffic ticket in most states is not an admission of guilt. It's a promise to respond, either by paying or by contesting it in court. You can sign a ticket, be completely respectful throughout the entire stop, say nothing that adds to the situation, and then contest the ticket in traffic court with your version of events presented properly. That's the system working the way it's supposed to. And here's something that doesn't get said enough. The officer who stops someone calm, cooperative with what was actually required, respectful throughout, writes a different report than the one who stops someone who argued, contradicted themselves, or tried to talk their way out of it at the window. That report gets read by prosecutors, sometimes by judges. Your behavior during the stop has a life beyond the stop itself. Calm isn't just protection in the moment, it's part of the record. Let's land this. You don't need to remember every case name. You don't need to memorize constitutional amendments by number. You just need 5 things. And if these 5 things are somewhere in your head before you ever get pulled over, you're in a significantly better position than almost everyone else on the road. 1. When asked why you think you were stopped, "I'm not sure, officer," every time. 2. Provide your license, registration, and insurance when asked. Announce before you reach for anything in the glove compartment. 3. For questions beyond the stop itself, "I'd rather not answer questions, officer." Polite, final. 4. For any search request, "I don't consent to searches." Once, calmly. No explanation needed. 5. If detained, "I'd like to speak with an attorney." And then you stop talking. 5 sentences. That's your entire toolkit. You don't need to know the law cold. You don't need to argue with anyone. You just need those 5 sentences, said calmly, said without aggression, said to a person you're treating with basic respect. Because here's the thing that I think is actually worth sitting with for a second. The people who get hurt the most in these situations aren't the ones with bad intentions. They're regular people who were never told they had a choice, who thought cooperation meant giving up every right they had, who thought that knowing your rights was somehow the same as being difficult or having something to hide. It isn't. Knowing your rights is preparation. It's the same reason you wear a seatbelt, not because you expect to crash, but because if something unexpected happens, you want to be protected. Most traffic stops are completely fine. Most officers are professional. Most of the time, this is over in 3 minutes and you're back on the road. But you don't know which stop is the one where it matters. You don't know what's already in the system, what the officer is looking for, what a single unguarded sentence might cost you. So you know your 5 sentences. You stay calm. You don't add words to a situation that doesn't need them, and you drive away. That's the whole thing. Now, one last thought before you go. Everything we covered today happened during a traffic stop, a contained situation. There's a beginning, there's an interaction, there's an ending. But what happens when it's not a traffic stop? What happens when it's a knock at your front door? When someone in a uniform is standing on your porch asking to come inside, and the word yes in that situation carries consequences that are genuinely different and in some ways heavier than anything we talked about today. Because at a traffic stop, the interaction comes to you. At your front door, you control the opening move. And most people have never once thought through what their rights actually are in that moment, what they have to do, what they don't have to do, and what one wrong word can cost them. That's where we're going next. And you're going to want to know this one.